Hey everyone, I hope that you're doing very well today. Really quickly, I wanted to give a message to you all in the hopes that it resonates with someone and that it will inspire you to look at the current conditions of our society and this massive and very critical and long awaited socio-political shift that's taking place here within the United States and also in other parts of the world. I was having this really amazing conversation with a very, very dear friend of mine about 2 nights ago. And we were talking about what everybody is talking about right now, which are the massive protests that are taking place all over the United States of America and also in other parts of the world. And as we were talking about this particular issue, he made this statement and said, I'm not a protester. He said, I'm not a protester. I'm not the kind of person who would go out into the streets and to, hold up a sign or to walk around with, a bullhorn or do like a peaceful demonstration, et cetera, et cetera. He said, I'm not a protester. And immediately after he said this, I countered what he was saying and I told him, you are a protester. And so there was this moment of silence. And he said, well, what do you mean? And so this is the message that I gave him that I want to give to you all. Everyone has the capacity and the ability to be a protester. How we live our lives, the decisions that we make, the day-to-day experiences that we have and how we respond to them can be a simple act of protest in opposition to any form of tyranny or any form of oppression. Let's define and deconstruct what it means to protest. So the definition of protest is an act or an expression of disapproval or objection to something. When we are specifically relating it to the space or the realm of socio-political action, we can protest a particular ideology or a particular set of legislation or any sort of social action that is really attempting to suppress the human spirit. I firmly believe that one of the many reasons why so many people in our society today, currently, truly believe that they are somehow incapable of contributing to this social movement or being a part of the rebellion against white supremacy and the assassination of Black people specifically right now, and why they simply cannot be a protester or why they are not a protester is because of the way in which protesting has been depicted. If we stop and take a moment to think about how we have been sort of conditioned to see protesting and protesters, it has most oftentimes been done through visual images, right? If you have seen documentaries about various movements of resistance over the last, let's say, 100 years, we can typically go into our minds and recall the images that we've seen. It's either been through black and white photographs, which are still images, or it's been through sometimes black and white or technicolor video footage, right? Where people have stood in public squares or public forums and they've held picket signs, they have walked around with a bullhorn, they have, done the March on Washington, for example, and many other forms of active protesting in a socio-political sense. Because of the white supremacist structure and matrix in which we all inhabit, this matrix is and has always been characterized by conformity. Because of the very undeniable process, systematized process of mental programming, mental conditioning, social engineering, and I would even argue spiritual control as well. Many of us, on a very unconscious, even cellular level, have wholeheartedly adopted whatever the status quo is. In regards to protesting, we truly believe that protesting looks like one thing, that protesting, especially in a socio-political sense, feels like one thing. And my message to you all that are listening is that we, as multi-dimensional, infinite beings, cannot simply approach any area of our lives from one perspective. For many of us, every single thing that we do in our lives every single day is a protest, is an objection to the status quo. And I'll give you some examples. For myself, as a heterosexual, cisgendered woman, the way in which I protest actively against the domination, against the maltreatment, against the discrimination, against the stereotyping of members of the LGBTQIA community is when I am around heterosexual, cisgendered people who use homophobic and transphobic language, is that I pop off and I lovingly and compassionately, but very intentionally, correct that behavior. I let them know that that language is not allowed, and I tell them why it's not. That is a protest, a direct protest against homophobia or transphobia. It is a protest against deeply embedded heterosexist norms. Some of the ways in which people can and should be living their lives in a protest to racial tyranny is how you raise your children. Are you raising your children in your home, in a space in which you are cultivating one where racial equity is a reality? Are you educating your children on the history of racial oppression, not only here within the United States, but in other parts of the world? And are you embodying what it means to be equitable in how you treat people of various races and ethnicities? That is how you live your life as a protester. Other ways in which you can and should be a protester to the dehumanization of people in general is by the language that you use. Take stock of the language and or the phrases that you most commonly use. Does it perpetuate sexist, racist, classist, transphobic, homophobic norms? And if it does, well then now is the time for you to become an active protester against those very same forces. So while going out into the streets and, being a part of this very visceral, this very vital and highly, highly important and, extremely visible form of protesting and ensuring that it will create a domino effect, right? And spark some much needed change on the social, political, and the legislative level that we're seeing right now within our society. Even though those things are highly effective, that's simply one way to protest. When we are no longer protesting physically out in various public spaces, which are again highly effective, consider the way in which you are still taking that energy and taking that spirit of actively protesting against any hegemonic or any oppressive force into your homes and into your day-to-day lives and experiences. Protesting should not simply be relegated to a very public display of active protest or being in opposition to whatever the tyrannical status quo is. You have to embody it. You have to live your life every single day as a protester against whatever the oppressive regime or oppressive force is at that time. Sometimes protesting looks like simply having a one-on-one heart-to-heart conversation with a coworker or a family friend who is a carrier or a harbinger of these social and ideological maladies like racism, sexism, homophobia, classism, transphobia, and also people who are anti-environmentalists. Think about how you can be a part of a massive shift and a massive change by actively protesting in your life every single day. You know, I would strongly encourage everyone to reassess your definition of the word protest and your belief systems surrounding that, because there is always more than one way to achieve a goal. There's always more than one way to live life. There's always more than one way to enact change and also justice. So I hope that this message resonates with you all, and y'all stay safe. I'm sending you lots of love.